Hello, friends. I'm going to talk about one of my favorites. I did another video about this guy, this fantastic fretless bass player, and a lot of people responded. A lot of great comments. A lot of people really also share my love for this guy's music and playing and stylings. I'm talking about Mick Karn. And this is sort of part two Mick Karn appreciation podcast. Um, I talked about his work with Japan and his first solo album, I think, and the other one. But a little bit later, he did more collaborations and solo work. Solo work meaning with his own name. He worked with musicians on there as well, but I mean, he didn't do everything himself. But he did control it. I think he wrote it. You can feel him in these recordings. One of the first ones I want to talk about, I think I'm only going to talk about two today on this one. But this one is one of my favorites. I said that his first solo album is called Titles is a favorite, and it is because I remember when that came out, it was so great. It was like one of the things that I loved about Japan, and here it was in the forefront. It was like the bass playing was like the center of attention in this music, and I just thought it was exactly what I wanted to hear. And then in the 90s, around 1993, Mick Karn put out this album called Bestial Cluster, which is kind of an interesting name. There it is, and there he is on the cover, looking pretty scary, looking kind of beast-like. But this album is fantastic. This is a really good, one of my favorites of his solo works. It's moody. It's got tons of his distinctive bass playing and his interesting choices, melodic choices, and rhythmic choices. I talked a lot about his melodies, his unusual choices with regard to melody, like where to take the notes, what note to play next, what note works with this note. If I'm going to play this note, what should come next? And some people don't do that. Some people don't put the note that's supposed to come next. They think of a better note. And he was one of the people that could think of a better progression, a better idea for a melody that a lot of people would be like, where did that come from? And a lot of musicians listen to his music and say, where did that come from? Where did that melody come from? How did he think of that? A lot of it has to do with the melody, but another aspect of his playing that fascinates me is the rhythmic nature of it. Not only is he playing notes that you don't expect and chord changes that you don't expect and progressions that you don't expect, time signatures that you don't expect, he's also using rhythms that you don't necessarily expect in a pop song or whatever. This album has got a lot of that. Like Dolly's Car, like his first solo album, Titles, there are rhythmic sequences that he does with his bass. If you just listen to the rhythms of it, flatten out the notes to just don't think about the notes, but just listen to the rhythm of how he's playing his bass and how he's where there's emptiness, where there's nothing, where there's no note. And I think the quote is given to I think it was Miles Davis that said, "Silence is a note." Not sure if it was Miles Davis, but silence is definitely a note. If you're a musician, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not a musician, you know what I'm talking about, because sometimes those moments when there is no note, it's like you're holding your breath for a second, and it adds this tension. It adds suspense to the music. It puts a lot of emphasis on the notes too, because when the note does finally come back after that silence, it's profound. It's more profound. And there's a lot of philosophical things to talk about as far as how music is constructed. And one of the things that I get when I listen to Mick Karn's music, when I listen to the music that he wrote, the bass lines that he wrote, the melodies, the songs, I get a lot of that feeling of the magical aspect of music, the part that I don't understand. I mean, I know how to play a lot of stuff and I've been playing my whole life, but there's some aspects of music that nobody understands. It's like quantum physics. It's like Richard Feynman said, if you understand, any scientist who says that he understands quantum physics is lying, because nobody understands it. It just doesn't make sense. And to me, some analysis of music, which is why I have the title of this, which is why the title of this podcast is what it is. It is confusing and ambiguous. Music is a weird thing. Music exists out there. Everybody seems to love it. And we don't really know why we love it. It happens, it plays, its tones, its beats, its rhythms, its tones on top of rhythms, its words, its voices, its instruments. Put all that stuff together and it can break your heart. It can make you cry. It can make you laugh and make you sing along. It can make you nostalgic for the past. It can bring up sadness, happiness, angst, anger. You know, it can generate emotions from you as though you're having a spell cast on you. And I believe musicians like Mick Karn understand that and have a connection to that aspect of music. They understand that aspect of music. They know how to access that aspect of music. And I love musicians who seem to do that, who have a feel for it in a way that brings music to life in that magical way that takes you somewhere. Like I always talk about in these things, it takes you on a trip, on a journey, brings you somewhere. You put the headphones on and you go somewhere else with this music. That's what it is. Bestial Cluster is a really good one. It is, there's vocals on there, there's lyrics, there's singing, but a lot of it is just rhythmic melodies, hypnotic, kind of trancey hypnotic melodies with that incredible milky, flowy, rubbery sound of his fretless bass playing notes that you aren't expecting. And he's done some collaborations as well. There's one that I have here called Polytown, which he did with these musicians, David Torn and Terry Bozzio, the drummer who had played with Missing Persons, I believe, an 80s pop band, and Frank Zappa, a really good drummer, a real sort of prog-ish kind of drummer. Reminds me a little bit of Bill Bruford in his style, his very quick rolls and things like that, really crazy fills and things, and the metronomic beat and the idea, also the idea of silence being a note with the percussion with drums. David Torn is a guitar player you've probably heard of, amazing guitar player, musician, and put these three people together, Mick Karn, David Torn, Terry Bozzio, and you get this record. Band, I believe, is called Polytown. It's in general, I believe it is a instrumental album. I think there might be voices on here. I think there's credits on here with voices, and but not necessarily singing. It is a sort of almost jazzy vibe to it. It could be considered jazz fusion, perhaps. I'm not sure if I want to go that far, but it is progressive. It's kind of prog rock like. I think partly because of David Torn's guitar style, and of course Terry Bozzio's very prog like drumming. But then you have Mick Karn in here, who brings it all down to reality. I think brings it into sort of an earthy feel, where you have these beats and guitar playing that might sound a little bit more traditional than Mick Karn's bass playing is. Mick Karn is by no means a traditional bass player. He probably could have played anything. He probably could have played along perfectly to like a Van Halen song or something like that. But he did not do that on his records. He played in a style that was absolutely his own. I don't hear people mimicking him very often because I think it's really difficult to. Um, and not just to where to put your fingers and how to play the string, the technique. I'm talking again about melody and songwriting, musicality, music choices, and chord progressions and song structure and things like that. I think it's an interesting listen. It's probably not one of my favorites of Mick Karn's output, but definitely worth a listen. If you, it is kind of hypnotic. It kind of does have that kind of almost drone, not really a drone, but a kind of prog-like drone to some of the songs where the rhythms kind of go on and repeat until they become sort of hypnotic, and yet there's a flowing bass, fretless bass on top of everything. So those are two albums, Mick Karn related, that I want to recommend. I want to bring them up and see if you guys have heard them or already way ahead of me on them. But hopefully there's maybe some new information that I can provide. I know there's a lot of people who are just way ahead of me on Mick Karn. They're like, yeah, been there, know about him. You don't have to tell me. And that's cool. And it's fun for me to talk about. So I come in here and I talk about it, and I hope maybe somebody listens to this and gets past my rambling and says, well, you know what? He likes it so much, maybe I'll give it a listen. I hope that's how it works. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I will talk to you again real soon.